Welcome to another episode of Left Coast Sports with Jon Schaeffer, and this is our second look at the Pac-12 Conference. We spoke with UCLA Bruins beat writer for the LA Times, Ben Bolch, just a couple of weeks ago. And if you're a college basketball fan or a fan of the Pac-12, I think you'll enjoy it. Hope you'll give it a listen. And before we get started, please give us an auto download on your podcast platform so you'll get future episodes automatically. Left Coast Sports right now is on most major podcast platforms, including Apple, including iHeartRadio. We're on YouTube. And while you're here and listening, switch over to Twitter and give me a follow there at Jon Schaeffer. That's JonSchaeffer at Jon Schaeffer. Today, we're going to continue our look at the men's basketball programs in the state of California, vying for a spot in this year's NCAA Tournament with Selection Sunday now less than 5 weeks away. Today, we turn our attention to the USC Trojans, one of the surprise teams right now in the Pac-12. They've got a very realistic chance to win a regular season Pac-12 title. And coming up in this episode, we'll talk with USC radio voice Jordan Moore about the Trojans' success this year and the team's chances come March. USC is currently trending upwards under eighth-year head coach Andy Enfield, who took the job after leading Florida Gulf Coast, a.k.a. Dunk City, to the Sweet 16 back in 2013. And last year, SC was playing like one of the best teams in the West down the stretch of the season. Before the pandemic, they went 22-9. They finished in third place in the Pac-12, and they would have absolutely been in the field of 68 if not for the shutdown. This year, the Trojans might be even better with a chance to be a top 4 seed in the NCAA Tournament. SC is led by a freshman phenom, Evan Mobley, the team's top scorer, rebounder, and shot blocker, and a surefire lottery pick this summer in the NBA draft. They aren't just winning, but they're winning big and enjoying their best point differential in a season since 1971, 50 seasons ago. The Trojans have been very stingy on defense. Opponents right now shooting under 38% from the floor against them this year. In addition to Mobley, Taj Edey, a transfer guard from Santa Clara, has had a productive season, scoring 13 points per game. And the Trojans have great balance and depth. 5 other players averaging more than 6 points per game. They're also the tallest team in the nation with an average height of 6'7", led by the 7-footer Mobley. Now, all time, the Trojans' tournament success has been limited. Their last trip to a Sweet 16, all the way back in 2007 under Tim Floyd. The last SC team to make a deeper run was the Trojans' 2001 Elite 8 team. That was piloted by Henry Bibby. The Trojans do claim 2 Final Four trips, although none in the last half century, with the last trip coming all the way back in 1954. On this week's episode of Left Coast Sports, I'm joined by Trojans radio voice Jordan Moore as we discuss SC's return to the top 25, the brilliance of Evan Mobley, and how deep this team could go this March. So, Jordan, as you know, USC finally in the AP poll for the first time this season. Are you surprised at all it took this long for the Trojans to get ranked, considering the season they're having?
I mean, a little bit. I mean, I definitely think that they deserve to be ranked before now. I don't put a whole lot of stock in the rankings. They mean nothing. They're not on the team sheets. But I know it's really important for the fans, and so I'm really happy that they are ranked because, it gives credibility to our own fans, which is an issue that's been a long time at USC, which is this idea that even our own fans don't necessarily believe the team's good until you're sort of well into the season or into a tournament run. It's always a case where they're just sort of afraid it's not real, it's not really happening, and I think this team is really good and deserves it. And so I'm happy to see them ranked, and now we'll see how they handle success.
Was there a moment where it became real for you this year when you thought, hey, this team has a chance not only to be good, but maybe very good and make some noise even in the NCAA tournament?
That's a good question. I mean, I came into the season, honestly, with not the highest expectations. I thought that they'd be good, but I couldn't figure out where they were going to be better than last year. And last year's team probably was going to be like an 8-9 seed. And so I sort of thought that was kind of the expectations for this team. Hey, just get in the tournament clean and it'll be a good season. It wasn't until I really saw Evan Mobley in full flight that I realized this is a little bit different. I mean, as good as Onyeka Okongwu was last year, as good as some of the players have been in recent history in the program, this is a talent of a different order. And not only that, the pieces fit a little bit better around him than maybe some of the star players had the pieces fit around them. So, it was just an all-new team. And so it took a little while before you got to see that, like, oh, this kind of mix works. and there's a lot of strengths on this team. There are some weaknesses, but when you see the pieces fit together better, sometimes that's what matters most in a sport like basketball.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned Mobley, and obviously you look at the numbers and you can watch him on TV, and he's had such a good year. But where have you seen the improvement from the start of this freshman season to where we are now in February?
I'll be honest. He's been pretty good throughout. I mean, he's definitely improved at the free throw line. If you just want to take a straight up measurable, he started the season kind of poorly. It was like 50% through the first, 5-7 games or something like that. He's been pretty lights out at the free throw line since. And then when you're a big man making free throws, you do just about everything else well. There's just not a whole lot that people can do with you other than just double team. And so the other area he's improved is trying to be a little bit more alpha and make sure that he is impacting the game even when the other team is determined to make somebody else beat them. And so, he doesn't necessarily score 25 a night because he's seeing just a steady diet of double and triple teams or zones, but he's always having an impact. He's getting on the glass even better than he was in the beginning of the season. But he's such a willing, selfless passer that they play great team basketball often as a result of all that attention that he gets. And again, that's kind of been true from the start. I mean, he really is a well-schooled, credit to his father and his coaches in the past, because he, like his brother, came in with such a diverse skill set and such a selfless mindset that they're really great team players. And again, that's probably why the pieces fit so well around them.
How do you describe the rivalry with UCLA and men's basketball? I know, obviously, this past weekend, a big game between USC and UCLA for the top of the standings right now in the Pac-12. How is this rivalry received on the basketball floor?
Yeah, I mean, if we're being honest, historically, it's the exact opposite of the football rivalry, which is, they're the basketball school and we're the football school. I think it's, as always, the USC basketball job has always been looked at as like the sort of untapped potential, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, even if you're going to have the expectations or even at times reach the heights of UCLA, there's no reason you can't be good, because UCLA or whoever only gets 3-4 players a year, right? So there's plenty of players out there for someone to get good, and Andy Enfield has sort of done that, and he hasn't necessarily done it by out recruiting UCLA, by going and saying, hey, here's the best player in Los Angeles, and he's going to choose USC over UCLA. At times that's been the case. But, I think at times it's being a little bit more creative with roster building, finding the right mix, finding a way to get old, which I think is really important now in college basketball. The best teams are the older teams. And despite, if you can get in Evan Mobley, great. But relying on freshmen year in and year out and roster turnover, and hoping that 18-year-olds can always be the savior, I actually think is how all these blue bloods are getting into trouble, like you're seeing Kentucky and Duke, falling out of the rankings, because it's just hard to refresh every year and hope that the next crop of freshmen are great. So, when you look at USC and UCLA, I think UCLA has been caught at times trying to do that as one of those quote-unquote blue bloods that's not ranked right now. But USC has figured out, I think, a much sweeter spot of trying to either bring in older players or develop some guys over 2, 3, 4 years. And I think that's really worked well for Andy Enfield to get his footing in this rivalry. And just as a whole, when USC's been good in this rivalry or in this city or conference, that's the formula that's worked for the Trojans, not trying to beat UCLA at its own game.
Yeah, it's a good segue in terms of trying to get old, because this year SC added a fifth-year player in Taj Edey out of Santa Clara, a grad transfer. What type of role has he played, and how valuable is his experience right now?
Well, we lost 2 seniors. We actually lost 3, really, from the rotation, because you had a grad transfer last year, and Daniel Utomi that also started. But when you look at the 2 guys last year, you had Nick Rakocevic, who's one of those rebounders in school history, and then you had Jonah Matthews. And everyone remembers Jonah's moment to end last season, that sort of great senior moment on his senior day, hitting the step-back 3 buzzer beater to beat UCLA on CBS. And, such a cool moment in the Pat Galen Center. And so you looked at him and you go, again, okay, so how are you going to get better from last year when you lose some players like that? And, they brought in Taj, and if you look at Taj's statistical profile, it's almost exactly the same as Jonah's at the offensive end. And so, credit to them for going to find a guy who actually didn't have a great year with Santa Clara last year, but 2 years ago he had a great year with Santa Clara. He lit USC up in a game when they went up to Santa Clara and lost in double overtime, and sort of stored that in the back of their minds. And he's coming here, and he's old. I mean, that's exactly what he is. He's just a veteran. He's really confident. Sometimes he starts games shooting poorly, but he doesn't seem to ever let it affect the next shot or his mindset or mentality. So, I've been so impressed with Taj. He's not the same caliber defensive player that Jonah was, but he really has replaced that late game clutch scoring guard, and every team needs that.
What type of X factor could Ethan Anderson be in the second half? He's coming off that huge game against UCLA. I know he's been slowed by a back for at least a handful of weeks, if not more of that. Will he play an important role potentially down the stretch for SC?
Yeah, I think he needs to. I mean, it's a good question. Ethan's had such a stop-start season. You feel for him. I think the coronavirus offseason hurt him a little bit. Didn't come in at 100%, and then the back issue just was sort of a result of all that, and it really just destroyed the first half of his season. And then, the team played so well without him, so he sort of had to fit in when he came back. Going into the season, he's your starting point guard, your captain. He's expected to lead the team, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, you're going to come off the bench, sort of try to fit into what we're doing well. We don't want to rock the boat right now. Everything's going great. And I think that's been a struggle for him as well. I mean, he talked pretty openly after the game on Saturday about that, he had to sort of get his groove back a little bit. And he appeared to against UCLA, and, he's certainly a guy that could take, all the major crunch time minutes and be a huge factor for this team the rest of the way. I mean, he is the best pure point guard on the team. He is the best perimeter defender on the team. He brings a toughness, tenaciousness to the game. So, I think that there's a ton he can bring if he can build off that performance against UCLA.
Let's talk a little bit about the toughness and the grittiness and the defense under Andy Enfield. I mean, this is a team that's holding opponents under 38% shooting this year, which is really incredible when you look at the schedule. How are they able to do it?
Well, you mentioned Andy Enfield, and I just think we should start with the fact that there are a lot of misconceptions about Andy Enfield, and one of them is he came from Florida Gulf Coast, and it was this idea everyone had never heard of him before, watched him in the tournament. That was a great, fun team. They had that Dunk City moniker. So, they came over here and everyone goes, oh, this is about offense. And, I think even the people that hired him, Pat Hayden included, who was the athletic director at the time, thought that was what he was buying. But Andy Enfield, if you look at his track record, his real mentor is Leonard Hamilton. And Leonard Hamilton is, Andy was an assistant at Florida State. And if you are to look at what Leonard Hamilton has built, which, by the way, he's an underrated coach who's starting to get a lot more credit later on in his career for what Florida State's been able to do at a football school. The USC is starting to look a lot more like those kind of things. So Florida State's a great defensive team, and how they do it, size. And USC is the biggest team in the country, so you see a lot of teams going small. USC has all these versatile players. Obviously, it all starts with Evan, who is at 7 feet tall, is the top 10 shot blocker in the nation, number one shot blocker in the Pac-12. But not only is he big, Evan and Isaiah Mobley both have the quickness and foot speed to switch on guards. And so you constantly see them get caught in switches, and the guards just give the ball up. They don't want anything to do with it because they don't want to shoot over the top of the size, and they can't beat them off the dribble. They know they're going to get their shot blocked. So it's one of the better shot blocking teams in the country. It's one of the better rebounding teams in the country. They have the ability to play man to man and switch, really 1 through 5. They have played some zone at times, and they can be super long in the zone. So it really is a good defensive team. Last year's team was a great defensive team. So you're starting to see in the last couple of years that, maybe the identity of an Andy Enfield team is at the defensive end.
Jordan, obviously still a ton of basketball in front of the Trojans, or just in general for the Pac-12 and around the country as a whole. But in your opinion, what would be considered a successful season at this point?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think expectations are moving up, right? I mean, success breeds more expectations. Just looking at the bracketology now, all of a sudden USC's in that conversation for 4, 5, 6 seeds. Mm-hmm. So, now you look at, hey, make the tournament, not even to win a game, or, maybe make a Sweet 16. I think if they made the Sweet 16, that would be a huge accomplishment for this program. It's, again, there just isn't a lot of history of USC teams doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
Tim Floyd made the Sweet 16 once with that group with Nick Young, and it was sort of a surprise run. Andy Enfield obviously did it at Florida Gulf Coast, a major surprise run. Henry Bibby early in the 2000s did it with made the Elite Eight with, again, a surprise run. So, if they were able to get in as a 4 or 5 seed and just sort of hold their seed and make it to a Sweet 16, or, who knows, beyond anything after that, I think would be gravy. But I think that would really hopefully solidify what this program has done with its own fans. Again, just trying to prove that what Andy Enfield has accomplished and his staff, with all the wins that they've had over the last handful of years, turn that into a little bit of tournament success. And I think they'll open USC fans' eyes to, where this program's headed, and really maybe go backwards a little bit and give credit to where they came from.
What's it like for you as an SC alum calling games for your alma mater now?
It's a dream. I mean, honestly, it's pretty wild. The other day, I call games by myself, but I had Sam Clancy in as a guest color commentator. And for those listening that don't remember Sam Clancy that well, but he's the last USC player to win Conference Player of the Year. He won Pac-10 Player of the Year in 2002. And he was on that team in 2001 that made the Elite Eight with Brandon Granville and Jeff Trapani, David Blumenthal, and Brian Scalabrine. And, for me, I was a freshman back then. So my freshman year was actually the year that was Sam's senior year. So pretty crazy, just having it all sort of come full circle as a guy that, I love basketball. And so even though USC basketball's never had the following, I've always loved it. I was very lucky from a football side to be at USC during the early Pete Carroll years and see all that success. But nothing brings me more joy than seeing the basketball program grow, and it's been fun calling the games, and just fun watching them. We've had some rough seasons. I was on the broadcast not too long ago when we went 6-26, so I certainly don't take it for granted when you're sitting here at the top of the Pac-12.
All right, Jordan, before I let you go, I want to ask you about just the state of the Pac-12 in general, and how many teams you could forecast or envision in the NCAA tournament this year.
Yeah, I think 5 are in pretty good shape. Might have been 6 if Arizona hadn't pulled itself out of contention. So not a bad year at all right now for the league. It's obviously a tough year to judge. I think computer rankings will play a bigger factor than usual, and so that's why I look at the 5 teams that they all seem to be in pretty good shape when you look at their nets. And there's just not a lot of cross-conference comparison to make otherwise. So, I think, at the top, you have SC right now. I think UCLA is dealing with some roster issues, and I don't think ever since Chris Smith went down, I don't know if they have the high-end talent. I actually think Mick Cronin's done a pretty good job with what he's got. I mean, there's obviously some really good recruits there, but if you just look at sort of elite talent, I don't think there's a ton there. Colorado's the team that scares me the most. They've given USC some problems. They have a senior point guard, McKinley Wright, and just a very physical basketball team. They tend to lose some games that they shouldn't, but when you put them in the games that matter, I actually think that they can compete very well. And then Oregon, if Oregon can get it together on the COVID side, has a really good roster. Just a lot of sort of talented wing, long guards. They're not very big, but I think if they could get some time on the court together healthy, that could be a team that's really good. And then Stanford, has Oscar Da Silva, who's one of the best players in the conference and a talented freshman if he comes back. when he comes back, hopefully, and Zaire Williams. So those would hopefully be the 5. And, it was really disappointing for the conference last year because it was a great year for the league. And to have the tournament canceled and sort of not get credit for that was really disappointing. But it's been pretty decent this year. A couple teams at the bottom that have some work to do, but I think at least those 5 teams at the top are in pretty good shape.
Jordan, I appreciate your time today. Best of luck down the stretch here in 2021, and best of luck, hopefully, for the Trojans in March Madness as well.
Thank you. Appreciate having me on.
Thanks again to Jordan Moore for spending some time with us on Left Coast Sports. I'm a huge fan, by the way, of his play-by-play. Give him a follow on Twitter, @MooreSports. That's @MOORE Sports. If you haven't already, please subscribe and auto-download future episodes on whichever podcast platform you're listening to this podcast on. And please give me a follow on Twitter, @Jon Schaeffer. That's JONSCHAEFFER. Also, coming this March to your view, Advance to Indianapolis, a 4-week college basketball tournament show that follows local teams and players on their journey to the national championship. Each week, Advance to Indy reviews the previous weekend's rounds and looks ahead to the upcoming weekend. Each show airs 4 times per week with 16 total show airings throughout the tournament. Advance to Indy includes interviews, expert analysis, along with local stories on the teams, players, and fans that make the madness of March so much fun. For more information, visit yourview.com. That's yourview.com. Next week on Left Coast Sports, we'll be inside 1 month until Selection Sunday. How many schools from California will be dancing? We'll find out soon enough. Thanks for listening. We'll catch up next week on Left Coast Sports with Jon Schaeffer.